Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Cyrus from 2010. This, of course, is on Hulu currently. So, I went on and I was to just kind of understand what exactly this film was about, and went on and I felt like there was some kind of thing that felt so familiar to the movie like Step Brothers to this, but here is also the thing, like, this movie was so painfully dry, and it never really goes anywhere with the time that it has, to where I was just like, okay, like, they could have gone and done so many things with this movie, but it really just decides that they honestly go nowhere with it, and it was just kind of disappointing at the end of it all. Just go on and like, okay, this is to, like, it seems that this is all to be a good cast, but again, it's one of those movies where really there's so much about it that is to make you think that there's a real movie at some point going to happen, but it just never does. So with that said, what is this movie about? So we go on and we have John, who is to be at a point in his life where he can't kind of bounce back from, because he is to divorce a woman called Jamie, and she's uh, been divorced from John for 7 years, and Jamie is to now tell John that she, of course, is married, and that John has to figure out a way to move on also. That he needs to go and find a woman, or be able to find something so he can be able to kind of move on with his life. Weirdly, we have an ex-wife that is to go out of her way to try to find or possibly get John to get his groove back, supposedly, which I'm like, okay, that just seems very odd. Why would an ex-wife even give a like? Probably for her, it's like, well, hey, I'm in a happy place now, so how about you go on and you be in a happy place? Because maybe they're still really just good friends. So John eventually goes to this party, and it seems that this guy is kind of awkward, or to be a guy who doesn't really know how to exactly approach things and whatever. And so John just decides to just be himself, to just be honest, and eventually at some point that finally works, and he is to meet a girl named Molly, and things start to pop off fairly well between the two of them. But then John is to all of a sudden realize that Molly is kind of scrambling off within their relationship, and John is kind of curious why, to the point of him going to seek out and stalk this woman, to then turn around and eventually find that Molly is to have a 22-year-old son named Cyrus, who is actually Jonah Hill in this movie. So, and then the battle begins between the two of them. Because, of course, Cyrus is to want to go on and, like, have his mother to himself, and John is to go on and not be wanting to be this, like, combative person, but then more and more he is going on and taking aside Jamie and questioning, like, well, like, is, like, Cyrus going on and, like, trying to figure out a way to, like, get me out of this equation? Is he trying to, like, we have John just rattling around with all this paranoia and all this conspiracy, which we eventually end up finding out is right towards the end of this film, or towards the back half of this film, to where then we realize that there was a battle going on that we weren't even aware of. So, so yeah. So with that said, like, even going into any part of this film is to really just kind of be spoilers because there isn't much to it. So with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers about this movie, talking more in depth about it. Because at the end of the day, I think it's time to say that this is about around that time to go into spoilers. So this again is conveniently on Hulu. I would say the grading of this, I would say that, like, concept, like the concept, like there's possibly something like there, but I would have to still say that this is just a very heavily disappointing film. I would say that this is a bad, if not worse than bad film. I'm kind of backing and forthing about it. Really, I wouldn't like go out of my way to tell people everybody go on and see Cyrus, because this movie is just too painfully dry. So yeah, so with that said, I think it's about that time to go on into spoilers about this one. It's about that double five time territory to just go into what is to be called spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time we get to spoil this movie. So John is to be at his rental place, and Jamie is to come over, and it seems that Jamie is to be knocking on John's door. She is to call him, and he is to possibly be alone, uh, smacking some ham, let's just say. So, which ham did you slap? Anyways, so Jamie is to walk in on John doing something with underwear, let's just say. And so John is to be surprised by Jamie. And Jamie is to go on and say, it's like, well, hey, I called. Hey, I did this. Hey, I did. So Jamie is to break the news to John that she is to be getting married soon. And John's like, well, huh. Like, oh, like, because it's been 7 years, but, like, he still hasn't moved on. Like, it's still a surprise. It's still very fresh. So Jamie is to go on and say, it's like, well, hey, like, I'm throwing a party, please come over, you'll go on, you'll meet some women, hopefully you'll be able to bounce back from all this, because Stella has to get her groove back, technically with John having to forcibly get his groove back in this movie. So John is to go on like, but he agrees to this. We at some point find out that I guess both Jamie and John are editors for possible trailers or movies, and so it seems like they can get their jobs done kind of whenever, as long as they get to the point of getting it done on some deadline. So John is to make his way to this party, and so he's really having some kind of trouble, like, even wanting to be tempted to go on and talk to people. And we have Tim, who is Jamie's husband, who is giving John a vodka Red Bull and just telling him, hey man, just kind of loosen up. Like, just get drunk. Like, if anything, like, maybe you'll just be able to talk to all these women. But both Jamie and Tim are just kind of pushing him in that direction. So John goes on and is to at first be waiting in the line for the bathroom and is talking to some woman nearby this thermostat. So we have John who's talking to this woman, and the thermostat is to fall over, and so John is just holding the thermostat thing just against the wall until this girl leaves. Very awkward, very uncomfortable, and then John just moves on to the next person, realizing that he had failed there. So John starts moving from woman to woman to woman, and he is at some point having a conversation with one lady about Red Bull and red wine, and, like, I guess that could be some kind of comparison between the two characters, but then the woman walks off. We have John who is to go and meet with some woman, and is to just kind of lay it all out on the table. And it seems that eventually even she is not interested. Where John is to just be honest and just say, like, well, you know what, like Jamie is to be my wife and or my ex-wife, and like it's been a while since I've talked to anybody and this and that. So John is going through a very rough patch and he needs to be very honest about it. So John has to realize he's to again fail with this woman. So John is just to be like, you know what, I'm just gonna go on and I'm going to, instead of having to go to the bathroom at some point because there's a line, I'm gonna go and whip this thing out and pee by these bushes. All of a sudden, while John is going on and doing that, he bumps into Molly. And Molly's like, hey, nice wang. And John's like, oh my god, like, I'm sorry I just whipped that out. And she's like, no, it's fine. If anything, I actually wanted to go and go pee out here too, but you took my spot. And John was like, oh, that's funny. So evidently, Molly was to overhear what John was saying earlier to that one other lady, and uh, he notices that Molly was to kind of really like that kind of honesty. So John is kind of mentioning how Molly is like, are you sure, like, you're talking to the right guy here? Like, are you sure this one, me, this guy? Like, I'm freaking Shrek. What are you doing here? Like, and so Molly's like, no, you're fine. Like, I'm sure you'll make me laugh and whatever. So John and Molly go and have a night of passion, and Molly is to leave John this note saying, last night was awesome, call me, here's my phone number. So John immediately the next day can't wait like X number of days and call her back, I guess, because John really doesn't care about that kind of weird, bizarre, like, oh, we should wait a couple days and then blah, 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 you know. So John is to immediately call Molly and say, like, well, hey, like, I know that we just met the night before, but hey, do you want to just kind of come over and like we'll think about doing something. So Molly comes over, John has to make food for her, and eventually they end up in bed again. So Molly is to now leave in the middle of the night, and John is to question, like, okay, like, why are you leaving so early? So John at one point is to just decide to just stalk Molly and find out where she lives, and then once he finds out where she lives, he's wanting to be tempted to approach her house, and he bumps into Cyrus, which is Molly's 22-year-old son. So, which I don't really know if we can exactly say that, like, Cyrus possibly in this movie is to pull off being 22, but again, we probably have like 30-year-olds playing like 16-year-olds also, so it never makes any sense. So Cyrus is to go on and spark a conversation with John and like say like, oh, you're a friend of my mom's? Yeah, like that's great, that's cool. Do you want to come in and kind of just kind of listen to some music that Cyrus is to put together? And John's like, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds great. So John and Cyrus are to eventually go inside this room. It seems that they're having a good rapport. Cyrus is to go and play this kind of kooky elevator music that he is to use like some kind of images from parks and stuff like that to try to get the vibe of what he's looking for as far as music is to go. So all of a sudden, Molly is to go on and come home, and she realizes, oh my god, like John's here, and then John and Cyrus explain it's like, well, hey, like like we were to just technically bump into one another as John was to technically stalk Molly. And so like they had a pretty good discussion, and so that just led Cyrus to just want to go on and invite John in. So furthermore, it starts to have John, Cyrus, and Molly all eating dinner together. And so we have it at one point where John is to be very honest with Cyrus and Molly, because Cyrus was to talk to John and kind of tell him a bunch of things about himself. But then Cyrus is like, "Well, hey, John, I don't know much about you, so like, why don't you go on and like tell me what you do for a living and tell me who you are." And so John is to mention that he's an editor and he has a DVD collection and like all this. And so Cyrus is like, "Well, that's great and all, but like, no, I need more. Tell me about yourself." So John is to mention that he was previously married and then divorced, and like now like he's just going through this really rough time, and so on and so forth. And Cyrus was like, "Oh, okay, well, all right, well, okay, you're being very honest." And so at some point, Cyrus is like, "Well, hey, like, because Cyrus is to mention that his father is no longer in the picture because I guess his dad was to run off at some point." And Cyrus was mentioning that to John like before Molly was to get in here and stuff like that. So, uh, so at some point we have also John mentioning to Cyrus that John and Molly are getting busy together or sleeping together. And so Cyrus is like, "Oh wow, like that's great that you're being very open about that." And John was like, "Well, yeah, like cuz like we want to like treat you as if you're an adult, so like we just want to tell you like where our relationship is and so on." And so Cyrus is like, "Yeah, I really respect that." And all that. So John and Molly are to go on to be in the room together, and Molly is to keep the door open, and Molly is to just like say that she just like there's no reason for it. She just likes it. So John was to want to like take off his pants and whatever, and it feels like there isn't going to be any monkey business supposedly going on between the two of them, anyways. So John is to wake up the next day and realize that his shoes are missing, to the point of him having to go to his editing job without shoes on. Because I guess he was to only have the one white Adidas shoes that I guess Jamie was to say was her favorite pair of shoes that John had. And so John is like, "Well, hey, where could these shoes have gone? Like how like he just kind of burrows in his head that it had to be Cyrus who bizarrely took the shoes. Come to find out, he finds out later that the shoes are in his closet, hidden away somewhere. He's like, "Oh, like I knew, like I had a theory, but I had to eventually test it out." So John is now having this paranoia about Cyrus, and to the point where he's exhausting Jamie about it and consistently having these like theories of like, "Well, was that something that he was thinking about all along? Was that his like thing that he's been like having these chess pieces for the longest stretch of time? The shoes was a part of it to tell me that I'm not welcome here." To the point of eventually like Tim even gets upset with John of just like, "God, like this guy, like is he married to my wife, or am I married to my wife? Like, hey, we're getting married soon and we should be focusing on that." But Jamie is so focused on being with John that she can't even pick out flowers for her wedding because John is getting so consumed with the paranoia of Cyrus at some point. So, so yeah, so John and Molly, things are going well, it seems, at the beginning, but again, John is burrowing away with paranoia. So, John and Molly are going so well that Molly is to close the door one night and be like, maybe we're going to get some action here. Which eventually leads to Cyrus all of a sudden having these night terrors, and Molly goes rushing to kind of wake up Cyrus to tell him he has had these night terrors. So John eventually is to ask Cyrus about these night terrors, and he's like, "Well, yeah, like I I have them every once in a while," and so like I guess that was the reason why Molly was to keep the door open. So even though Cyrus is to kind of consistently put these wrenches into what's really going on here, like John and Molly, like things are going to continue to go well, and so we get to this escalation of Cyrus is to decide that he wants to go on and move out, that he is to meet a couple of musicians on Craigslist, and that he's going to move out. And Molly's like, well, isn't that a little soon? Because Cyrus was to tell John that he should probably pull away from Molly like 20 to 10% sexually. And then Cyrus is to go on and tell Molly that that John thinks that they're moving too fast, even though neither one of them think anything of that. So all of a sudden, like John is to kind of want to get some distance between Cyrus and Molly, saying like, "Well, hey, I think that you guys like need some time alone, so maybe I should go on and kind of back away." And Molly doesn't want that, so John and Molly are back together again within this place, and so that's when Cyrus is to go on and say like, "Well, hey, I'm gonna move out. Let you guys have like your own thing," and so Cyrus is to go and move all of his stuff into this one truck, and Cyrus is to say to John, "It's like, well, hey, thanks, thank my mom for helping me pack all my things." John was like, "Well, actually, I packed all of those things, and I helped." And Cyrus is like, "Oh, okay, well, great." So you would have thought there would have been missing shoes or something like that. So Cyrus leaves. And so John and Molly are thriving. Nothing could be better. And John and Molly are going on and thinking that they can go on and just do it anywhere they want in the house, to the point of Molly is throwing off her dress for them to go at it. And all of a sudden, Cyrus is back, saying like, "Oh, well, things didn't work out. I had panic attacks, and now I think I should back away and maybe possibly move back in," because John, I guess, was to go on and eventually put all of his stuff into Cyrus's room because the room was empty. Because John was to decide to move in with Molly and take Cyrus's room, and decide to just make it his office because Cyrus wasn't there anyways. So John is to immediately just be like, "Oh, okay, there's something up here." To where John finally calls Cyrus on this. Finally. So we have John that talks to Molly and pulls her aside and says like, "Well, hey, like, do you think that Cyrus is just acting out? Do you think that..." Because here's the thing, when John was first here, Cyrus took his shoes and put them in the closet, and John was to tell Molly about this. And so Molly's like, well, no, like I think like he's having panic attacks, and like, do you think we should confront this about him? And he's like, no, 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 like I think I'm gonna go on, and I think me and him just need some time alone. And so John goes meets with Cyrus, and is to confront Cyrus, and is to showcase the shoes and bring him into the room and say, like I knew it was you. And so Cyrus to finally go on and like show his hand finally that yeah, he was trying to go on and like try to scare John off, and it just wasn't working. And so now John is like, I knew it. Like I knew you had some plan. And so now that you're going on and messing with me, I can do the exact same thing to you. So Molly comes back in the room and is trying to comfort Cyrus as Cyrus is flipping the bird to John. And so while Molly and John are talking, we have a point where Cyrus would have all these signs that are saying you're going down and all of this stuff. And I just thought that was funny. So we push on to have it where John and Molly are to go on to Jamie and Tim's wedding. And so now John and Molly just kind of go to this wedding and think that everything is going to be okay. But Cyrus, before the day, is to mention like, well, hey, like I guess I'm gonna go on to this wedding. John, do you have a time for me to borrow for me to go to this wedding? And John's like, well, wait a minute, like he's going to this wedding? Oh my god, there's something gonna happen there. And so John is asking Molly about like, well, does Cyrus really need to go to this wedding, and so on and so forth. So John is to finally just talk to Cyrus and say, hey, like I know that you're just so tempted to want to do something and pull something off so that way you can go and make me look bad and try to distance yourself and whatever, or make me look bad and kind of distance me from your mother. But like please do not choose this wedding to do this. Like John has a really good relationship with Jamie, and he doesn't want that to kind of conflict with what's going on between the two of them. So Cyrus is like, no, like I won't do anything. Fingers crossed. Nudge, nudge. So John is going to be like terrified the whole entire time during this wedding, thinking that Cyrus is still going to pull something off. So we have John, who eventually is just to go to the bathroom, and Cyrus is to continue to get very drunk during this wedding. So Cyrus is to walk in on John going to the bathroom, and I'm like, what is up with both Cyrus and both Molly like coming in on John while he's whipping it out? So we have John and we have Cyrus, and John is still pleading with Cyrus, please don't go on and do anything. Like, I get it, but just please, just don't. Like, you're going to make me. So Cyrus is to get more upset with John, and eventually they are now just wrestling it out right in front of everybody, and John is trying to stop this fight, but he can't. So it gets to the point where John and Cyrus are knocking over this gift table, and they're wrestling all over the place. And now John's like, oh my god, like here's the moment. So Molly's to come to the aid of Cyrus to say like, oh my god, you're hurting my son. And John's like, no, that's not what I meant to do. So, and then all of a sudden Jamie comes into the fray, and she's like, oh my god, John. And then John's like, oh my god, like he got me. Like that son of a... He got me. So now at this point, John is like, well, I'm effed. Like, there's nothing I can do. And so John is finally like, you know what? Like, I'm done with Molly. I'm done with Cyrus. I'm done with this. Like, this is like the one time that I just wanted, uh, like this to not backfire. And like, John is just starting to realize that it's just going to keep continuing to escalate. And there's no way that John is gonna finally just have things work out with Cyrus. So he's like, you know what, I'm done. I'm gonna move out of my place, and or I'm gonna move out of Molly's place and go back to my place. And so we finally have Molly, who's starting to realize that maybe Cyrus was to conflict with John and her relationship, because John is to finally yell at Molly to open her eyes and see what's really going on. And so Molly's like, well, maybe like there is some truth about what John is saying. And so Molly confronts Cyrus in his dimensions, like, well, hey, like, I don't like the fact that you were conflicting with my relationship with John. And the more and more that Molly's talking to John, the more Cyrus doesn't have anything that can like counter whatever Molly is saying. It just seems like he is to realize that he is digging himself into a hole the more that he talks. So Cyrus is to try to finally go on and do the right thing here, and is to meet up with John at his place. And John is like, wait a minute, like seriously, you're gonna come at me now? You're gonna like, you're like, dude, like, I'm not with Molly anymore. Like, stop. Like, no, like, this is over. And Cyrus is like, no, 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 no. Like there's truce and all of that. So Cyrus is to go on and is to say that John would have been a good dad, and that really they go on and kind of mend fences. And like, I'm not gonna get into the whole dialogue about all of what they say throughout this film, just kind of quickly glaze through it. So Cyrus is to mention that he needs a ride back to his place, to Molly's place. And so John is like, well, hey, like, I'll do the right thing and I'll give you a ride. So John drops off Cyrus back to Molly's place, and come to find out Cyrus was to want to give John back some of his items. At one point, also, Cyrus was looking at John's taxes at some point, but there was nothing he could really do with that, because I guess there wasn't enough time to do anything with that. As well as most of this movie was just not enough time to do much of anything. So Cyrus is to mention there's a bunch of stuff that John has, so he goes and walks and is to supposedly go and get these things. And so all of a sudden John is to realize that Molly is still at this house, because John is to ask Cyrus if Molly is there, and Cyrus is to lie and say Molly is not. So John seeing Molly and Molly seeing John, and so Molly's like, well, hey, do you want to just kind of come back inside? And John's like, like, I don't know. Like, I don't think so. And that's just kind of how the movie just ends, with us, like, getting this movie that is to kind of not go enough of anywhere within its time. We also had the one moment where, like, the one cool moment where John was to be at that party, and the one song "Don't You Want Me" by the Human League was on. And man, did I got a good kick out of that song, because I actually enjoy that song too. And so when they were playing that song, when they were singing and dancing along with it, and Molly was deciding to go on with John to eventually just start to dance and whatever, and just kind of have them be all drunk and having fun and whatever. That was kind of really fun. Evidently, that was John's favorite song, and so it just so happened to come on, and so it's like, yeah, let's dance to this. So yeah, I think most of the movie is kind of covered. I know I rushed through a lot of it, but like with this only being an hour and a half movie, like rushing would be like the right move to just go on and kind of quickly go through a lot of this dialogue. So hopefully I covered most of this movie, because at the end of the day, I think it's another time to just say I'm gonna get out of here so I can go on and do some other kind of content. So with that said, I think I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.